Well, good evening, everybody. My name is David Malling. I'm one of the commissioners for the Public Works Department. And I'm going to start us off on September 14th for our 6:30 meeting. South Pasadena Public Works Commission Statement of Civility. As your elected governing board, we will treat each other, members of the public and city employees, with patience, civility, courtesy as a model of the same behavior we wish to reflect in South Pasadena for the conduct of all city business and community participation. The decision made tonight will be for the benefit of the South Pasadena community and not for personal gain. Notice of public participation. South Pasadena Public Works Commission meeting will conduct an in-person from the chambers located at 1424 Mission Street, South Pasadena, pursuant to AB 361 Government Code Section 54953 subdivision E3. The Public Works Commission may conduct its meeting remotely and may be held via video conference. We have different ways to provide public comments and participation and viewing. And I believe we have a public comment individual today. Should we first do the call to order and then go to the public comment? Is that what you would prefer?
Yes, we're going to
Okay,
do call to
great.
order and then pledge of allegiance, and then we'll do our public comment.
Perfect. Let's do the roll call.
Evening, everybody. Chair Malling,
Present?
Vice Chair Catania,
Present.
Commissioner Hernandez,
Present.
excused for tonight's meeting, Commissioner Trevino, and City Council Liaison Snyder.
Here.
Staff present this evening, Public Works Director Ted Gerber is here. Public Works Deputy Director Antana Tesfaye is here. And Management Assistant Reina Salazar Martin, myself.
Well, great. And we'll start us off with the Pledge of Allegiance, if we can all look towards the flag. Great. And with that said, we'll hand it over to public comment. Hello, everybody. Feel free to stand.
Tonight, we just have one public comment. Katie Nielsen.
Hi.
Hi, thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me today. My name is Katie Nielsen, and I am a longtime resident of South Pasadena. I think I counted 27 years. I've worked for South Pasadena Unified School District for 24 years. I'm currently the assistant principal of Student Support Services, but I come to you tonight as a member of the Measure LL board for our library tax. So if you would indulge me, I'm here to talk about Measure LL, and it is a measure that will appear on South Pasadena's general election ballot on November 8th. It's asking voters to renew a small library tax, which is a property tax that has been in effect since 1994. And all proceeds go to the South Pasadena Public Library. These revenues make up an important 20% of the library's annual budget. And what does the library do for South Pasadena? Well, here are just some of the things. In a typical year, pre-pandemic, 20,000 customers visit each month. And items for reading, viewing, and listening are checked out more than 250,000 times. Our librarians connect people to information, plan community engagement activities, select books, DVDs, and CDs that our community loves to borrow. The Children's Room and its staff support school readiness, literacy, and a love for reading with year-round activities like story time and the summer reading program. The library also provides free high-speed Wi-Fi and a wide variety of digital resources, including streaming films, language learning tools, homework help, and skill building classes. So the big question, what does this cost our property owners? Actually, it costs very little. For $40.23 a year for a single family residence of up to 20,000 square feet, and $60.35 a year for a larger single family residence of up to 4,000 square feet. So for the cost of an inexpensive meal out, you're able to preserve a very important part of South Pasadena and what makes this a really wonderful place to live. What exactly is on the ballot? Well, voters are being asked to renew this special library tax at the same rate with its existing consumer price index adjustment. It has been renewed by the voters 4 times since 1994, and it's clear that this is something our community wants. This time, voters are being asked to extend Measure LL without the need for further needless renewals. However, voters do have the option to act to rescind it at any given time in the future. So this seems like a no-brainer. Why am I here? So this is our chance to end repeated renewals of this much valued revenue source. But voters have to vote. They have to take action. We must obtain 2/3 of those voting on the measure in order for it to pass. More information is available on the website. It's www.southpassyesonll.com. And you can find all kinds of information there, such as endorsing, checking the list of prominent citizens who have already endorsed. You can also donate and you can request a lawn sign. And I thank you for your time.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I definitely
Thank
support
you.
LL.
I
I'll be
have.
voting for it, so you've got my endorsement. So thank you very much. All righty, well,
So just one quick question. When you say 75% of the voters, that's 75% of the votes of those that are voting. It's not of the city. Okay, just to make it clear. Okay. And I know that you're going out and putting yard signs up. They're coming out to me, I know. Okay. All right. All right.
well,
Thank
sure,
you.
thank you. Action items. Ted, you have the floor. It's all about electronics today, huh?
That's right. Good evening, commissioners. Thank you. We have a brief presentation for you. I know it looks like it's long, but a lot of it's just background information that doesn't relate to what we're asking of you this evening. So if you recall, at one of our previous meetings, we had talked about some of the proposed city electrification projects. This included installing some electric vehicle chargers, the infrastructure to support it, solar panels. There were some other elements to that. And so we gave you kind of a brief overview of those projects that we were considering and researching. And the whole point of those projects was to, well, number one, the solar project, even though it started as a consideration to support electric vehicle fleet implementation, that solar project, which would be solar panels across the street here in the Mound and Hope parking lot, even if the city doesn't choose to electrify its fleet, those solar panels would be advantaged to providing electricity to City Hall here. In fact, the size of the solar panels, the power consumption at City Hall would exceed what we can actually build in terms of solar panels. So there's a net positive effect for those solar panels. But I'm not going to talk about the solar panels today. What I want to talk about is what we plan to bring to council next week, which is a combined item between the police department and the public works department, which is the police department are recommending leasing an electric vehicle fleet. And the public works department is recommending that in order to support that fleet implementation, that we participate in the Southern California Edison Charge Ready program, which is what we talked about in our last meeting. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background about both, and then I'll get into the meat of what we're talking about here. This will just take a couple minutes. If you could bring up that first slide, Raina. So in our last meeting, we talked a lot about the advantages of going to an electric fleet concerning the city's climate action plan. So we don't need to rehash those types of details. When we talk to the council next week, we'll be talking to them about a lease. The police will be talking about a lease agreement, and their motivation for going to these electric vehicles beyond the climate action plan is about fuel and maintenance cost savings, and then considering reliability, performance, and safety. Now, the Public Works Department is proposing cost-effective infrastructure projects to support that goal. And that's the part I'm going to talk to you about this evening. So what we're looking from you tonight is a recommendation to proceed with that specific charge ready program if the police vehicle fleet item is approved by council. So we're not asking you about electric vehicles and if we should go that direction. We're really just looking for recommendation, and we think this is the best support program if the police and the council decide to pursue electric vehicles.
So just a couple of questions.
Sure.
And I think one of the questions that I see the report and I look at the cost of the electrical vehicles and I know how expensive they are and the different models that they're looking at. The power that Edison is thinking about putting in the parking lot, is there any cost to us?
There's a small cost to us, and that's the item I'll get to tonight. No, I'm glad you asked, because in general, you hit the nail on the head with what we're talking about here. We think the cost is so minimal that, well, let me back up one step. The police are pursuing a full electrification. They want to look at 20 vehicles, 10 Tesla Model Ys that are for their patrol fleet, and then test 10 Model 3s, which would be for detective and administrative uses. They're going to propose to council several different options: a full electrification, a partial, spanning out over several years, a couple different scenarios depending on how much we want to commit to electric vehicles and how much money they want to spend in the leasing agreement. I mean, either way, they have to spend money because then they have to buy gas vehicles otherwise. But in our perspective, because of the tremendous cost savings for the Charge Ready program, which I'll get into the numbers, we think it would be prudent to pursue that program regardless of which option the police pick. Because, for example, if they don't do a full fleet electrification, let's say they want to do 5 cars this year and 5 cars the next year, the cost savings for us over time is such that it would make sense for us to still implement the whole array that we're recommending, even if they're going to piecemeal their implementation. And that's what we kind of want to see your thoughts on tonight. So that actually, you just sped up the presentation even faster I got to the point right there. Yeah.
One of the big things is I see the cost on those Teslas and it's crazy. And I know that the replacements, according to our fleet condition, it's pretty sad.
Mhm.
So they are going to be replaced, but I was more concerned as to if they don't go with the 20 cars, where are we with, and it can be used for other. Is the public going to be able to use that?
Yes, exactly. Another advantage that the public will be able to use it. So even if there's not full usage for the public safety fleet, then the public can use it as well. And then there's also other vehicles that we have. Public Works has several electric vehicles. So does some other departments that can use them as well.
Thank you.
Sure. So let me jump to the next slide quickly, and I can go through these next ones fast because these are mostly focused on the police background. So as you can see here, this is a list of the police vehicles, and I know it's very small print, but what we really just have to see is what's in yellow there. And this is actually marking what's out of service, out of warranty, or has had some sort of maintenance issue on the last month. So you can see the condition of the police existing fleet's somewhat dire, and that's what's motivating the whole thing, is that they need to replace the vehicles. And so their next step was, how do we choose what vehicles to replace? Next slide, if you will, Raina. Thank you. And so in doing that evaluation, of course, they took a look at what the city's goals are, including climate action goals. But even more importantly, the police department looked at the safety and protection of their officers. And they came to they arrived at the conclusion that the Model Y, Tesla Model Y, it has been identified as the safest SUV on the market between gas-powered vehicles and electric vehicles. And the police will present all the backup data for that during the council next week. I'm just really touching it here for you tonight. And then they also have some considered factors on performance and reliability. And I can talk about the electric system reliability in a few minutes, and then we'll get into cost benefit and savings at the end. So one slide here on electric vehicle adoption. Obviously, we understand that that's not something that's going away. That's the way that the market is moving. And so that's what makes, for the police department, that's what makes this a viable alternative in terms of the technology being there, the safety being there, and then the cost, even though it's a high cost to entry, it's a lower cost of overall maintenance over time. And so the police will also review their evaluation of leasing versus buying. I know that will be something that the council will want to discuss, but essentially leasing offers that lower cost to entry. Instead of making, say, like $1 million vehicle purchase, they can put a quarter of that value into leasing, and then they can retain the flexibility to change the vehicles out or also benefit from technology changes without having to own the vehicles. They can, get newer vehicles faster over time. And leasing is a reasonable program when you're talking about fleet management. Whether you personally lease or buy a car, there's pros and cons to that. But when you're talking about managing a fleet, many times leasing is the most cost-effective option for a public utility, public agency. Let's jump to the vehicle cost. So again, I won't dwell much on this, but this is what the types of costs that the police department are looking at. So they're looking about a $300,000 a year costs for leasing. And this is actually over time, this is a savings to what they spend in terms of operations and maintenance and fuel for the vehicles. And this factors in the cost of electricity.
300,000 after the first cost. Is that for all 20?
Yeah, that is for leasing 20 vehicles with a 383,000 down payment and then 304,000 each year payment.
And do we have a cost, what our current maintenance is now?
They do in their presentation. What I'll say is I think they've estimated about a $40,000 a year cost savings with leasing and maintaining electric vehicles versus maintaining gas powered vehicles. So getting into some of the issues between gas and electric, police found that electric vehicles has a reduced maintenance downtime. There's like hundreds, if not thousands, of fewer moving parts in an electric vehicle. There's always source and reduction concerns on both fronts in terms of like getting gasoline and the source of gasoline. We saw gasoline prices rise this year. There's also a concern with electricity availability. And I could talk a little bit about that in the next slide. And then there's just some sort of things that we don't necessarily think about that the police have evaluated in terms of the advantages, in terms of decreased background noises when operating the vehicles. And one comment we've heard from the council and the public is about the availability of electricity, especially during an outage. And, one thing to keep in mind, this will be more so for the council, is the electrical outages affect us in both ways. We're not able to use our electric powered gas pump here just as much as not being able to use an electric vehicle charger. The difference is we don't have another source of fuel unless we go to another location. Whereas under some of the projects we're talking about where we have independent solar generation of power, we would have another electrical source during some sort of extended outage. So this is a slide just to get you familiar with how the electrical grid works, because we're talking about electrical grid reliability. There's such a thing as the California Independent System Operator, which is the majority of what we call a balancing authority for the state. This is the area in orange here, where you can see the independent agency that is responsible for power distribution throughout the state. So most locations of the state are on this California ISO, Independent System Operator Balancing Authority. However, there is a section of Los Angeles where you can see that little brown area that says LADWP, where Los Angeles Department of Water and Power is the balancing authority for several cities. And so what this means is that when there's an extended outage for one balancing authority, it might not be the case for another balancing authority. And so in Los Angeles County, locally, there's alternatives if there was an outage for one authority where the other might not necessarily be out. And so that's important when you talk about public safety reliability, because, for example, where Pasadena and South Pasadena are under one authority, there's other charging stations in, say, Glendale. Glendale has a supercharger station that wouldn't necessarily be affected by the outage that's affecting us, and vice versa. Another aspect of this is that I believe that Pasadena has recently tested a system in which they can switch between the two operations as well. So that'd be an important topic.
So if we
Considering
run short like we have on water, we draw from.
Metropolitan.
Metropolitan.
Mhm.
This would be the same then if we ran short on power, we could draw from those other agencies? as
It's
well?
sort of the same thing, except for we wouldn't be able to draw within the city of South Pasadena. We would have to go outside the city to
Okay.
another location that we could use.
Okay,
And the police have identified several of those locations where they have charging infrastructure they could go to with their vehicle. I think the one in Glendale is 9 miles away. And so I won't spend too much time on this next slide here, but this is, the police's evaluation of various vehicles and why they picked the Tesla. Not necessarily important for our discussion tonight, but will be
no, they sure are fast.
for the council. They have a long range, they have high performance, high torque, high horsepower, fast acceleration, especially for a police pursuit vehicle. The cargo space necessary for upfitting with their police material, with their police equipment, long ranges. And then the most important thing was the safety rating, 5-star in all categories for National Highway Transportation Safety Authority. And then I think IIHS also high markings. And this next slide just reiterates the same thing, comparing the Tesla to an Ioniq 5, for example, a Hyundai vehicle. You can see the range is much higher in a Tesla. The horsepower as well. So in short, Tesla has really being an original manufacturer of electric vehicles and not necessarily being a manufacturer who is converting their offering to electric vehicles. They basically from the ground up developed this car. So let me jump to the next slide here. And this really kind of gives you a little bit more elaboration on the earlier discussion about costs. Considering, that the Tesla vehicles are a higher cost to entry, a higher purchase cost. However, they have similar ranges and the actual fuel costs and maintenance are lower, resulting in a lower cost per mile overall. Okay, now let's get into the public works stuff here, the last couple of slides. So as I mentioned earlier, the police will be discussing with council what the best option is for the city in terms of whether they make this transformation in whole, in part, or not at all. But we have really been focusing on what the infrastructure needs would be if they were to make this transition. So some time ago, and we've talked about in a previous meeting, we identified an opportunity with Southern California Edison for them to install level 2 chargers, which are basically chargers that allow you to charge overnight, fully charge overnight throughout the police department lot, the fire department lot, and the staff parking lot that's behind City Hall. And so this would give us 34 charging ports. Not necessarily 34 chargers. We actually have like 19 chargers, but some chargers have 2 ports and 2 cars can charge on the same equipment at the same time. So that actually saves us some money with 1 equipment purchase and installation, but 2 ports. So we did the math on this. And you're looking at that here. I wish this slide was a little bit more, visually stimulating, but it's basically just, an accounting breakdown here. So if we were to install the 34 ports that Edison would require if we were to utilize their program, in other words, they won't do all this work for you if you're just going to install a few ports. You have to really make a sizable installation. The real cost savings here that isn't on this slide is the infrastructure that Edison puts in. We're estimating that the infrastructure Edison would put in is going to be at least $500,000, if not closer to $700,000, because they'll be basically trenching, grading, installing electrical equipment. They do all of the transformer equipment, the metering, everything up into the connection point right above ground that the city would come in, purchase chargers and install those chargers on that port. So that's really where the cost saving is. Now, the counter to that is that the city is responsible for buying the chargers, maintaining them for 10 years, and also paying for network services, which basically, if you've ever gone to a public charger somewhere, you know, you could swipe your credit card or whatever, you know, your phone, and then it's networked, it's connected to the internet, and it can exchange information like the payment system, but it also sort of, it takes a look at how much electricity you're using, what time of day you're using it, and that type of thing. And we would have to report that data back to Edison, as well as if we wanted to collect payments, it would have to be that would have to be set up. Now, we wouldn't necessarily collect payments from the police. That would be, you know, basically part of our infrastructure. But the council may decide in the future that we want to collect some sort of payment from the public, from the public, if not just to offset the cost of the electricity that they'd be using, if not the chargers. But that's a future discussion that we're not sort of addressing here. So with that said, these are the costs that the city would have if we were to sign this agreement and work into this 10-year agreement with Edison for them to spend the hundreds of thousands of dollars to put everything in. So you have the cost of the chargers themselves. So for 34 ports, 30 of those ports are on those dual chargers that can charge 2 cars at once. And those cost about $2,500. And then 4 of those ports we think would be single ports just because of the way they're positioned in the parking lot. And those also cost slightly less, but about the same. And then you have to install those 19 units, which most of them we mounted on the walls. If you're familiar with the back of City Hall there, it's contained with walls, so we can save money by mounting them directly on the brick wall there. But some would actually have to be on a concrete pedestal because they'd be in the center of the parking lot. And so we think those installations are about, you know, $500 with about $100 of setup. They're not that expensive. But overall, the entire equipment purchase and installation, we think it would be about $60,000. We have 57,550 about there, but we think about 60,000. Now, right now, Edison is offering a rebate on chargers. So this whole program that Edison is funded through the California Public Utilities Commission. They've basically passed down a tremendous amount of funding for electric vehicle implementation in California. So Edison is taking that money, and this is the program they're implementing. They want to, install this, for mostly free for cities, but this is the city's obligation. And so part of that advantage is getting this $725 per port rebate. And so with that, we could knock almost half the cost of the equipment installation down to a little over 30,000. So right now you're just talking about, for all of that installation and equipment, really just a city cost on the tens of thousands of dollars. And that's why we think this is a really good program if the city decides to do this electrification. Now, I did talk about all those other expenses in terms of like networking fees, and we have to maintain those chargers for 10 years. So those are costs we need to consider. So our current quote on networking fees for 10 years, 12 months a year, so 120 months, we think it's about $15 a month. That's the recent estimates we've gotten from electric, companies that offer these network gateway services. So that's actually the bulk of the cost. It's that $60,000 for networking fees, and that's over 10 years. And then there's the maintenance of that equipment. So chargers can fault, they can, break down, things like that. And so we would want to purchase warranties. And we got some numbers here on a 8-year warranty. It's not the 10 years, but it gives you an estimate of what that would cost. And we think that would be about $200 a year per charger per year. And so, the running idea is that, maintaining a level 2 charger probably costs you a few $100s a year anyway, maybe $300-400 a year. So $250 a year for a maintenance deal is actually not that bad. So overall, you're looking at about $100,000 over the 10 years to actually support the requirements of that Edison program. So I should say that even though you're looking at let's just say it's $150,000 here, it doesn't include the revenue you would get from public charging. So that would also, also help you offset the costs as well as the energy. It doesn't include what's called this low carbon fuel standard credit program. And I won't get into the details of that, but it's similar to like a cap and trade program, but not exactly, in which case, like like, let's say a refinery has to pay to offset the carbon they generate, they would pay someone like us who's actually reducing carbon. So that's like an exchange program. And so you can make on the order of a few $1,000s a month on that type of program. But then again, on the flip side, that doesn't include the cost to repurchase chargers that need to be replaced within the 10 years. So you're looking at about $2,000 cost for those chargers. We do expect the chargers to last most of the 10 years, probably 7-8 years. So there might be some replacement of them, but we think properly maintained and cared for, we could probably make those chargers last. But once we get into 5 years into this program, we'd have to reevaluate, how those costs work. So that's the conversation on cost. That's nearly the end of the presentation. I just wanted to bring up the next slide here to sort of refresh your memory about what we're talking about here. So this is the back police lot. We're talking about this area that's outlined in that orange red color. On the left, you have the police lot. In the center, the fire lot. And then on the right is the staff lot. So you have 34 charging ports distributed to those lots. In the bottom blue area, we're reserving that area to possibly put a level 3 charger in. This would not be part of the Edison program. This would be a separate city effort that we'll talk to the city council about next week. But that would be sort of a necessary expansion if the police are doing a full electrification of the entire fleet. We'll need fast chargers in there to support.
Can that area be prepped? Because if you're gonna do all of this excavation and patching and running all of these different lines to all of these stations, would it not be best if we prep that blue area just to have it, I think, cost-wise?
That's exactly what we plan to do.
Oh.
But we really, and I'm glad you brought that up. We're really basically looking for the opportunity to do the same work at the same time. But of course, we need to, agree to do the charge ready program. Their design has to be completed. We have to coordinate all that construction work. And so that would be the plan if, depending on the direction. If you recall, we also had we had a stormwater project we were considering doing here. We talked about in our last one. We've since moved that to across the street. So we're not really, that's a separate consideration we're going to take to council separately. But yeah, in the same lines of trying to take advantage of opening up the area. So the very last slide here is actually talking about that. This is hard to see, but this is the charge ready schedule that they provide you. So we're still on step B, the signing of the agreement. So if council decides to move forward, the next thing for us to do would be to purchase that charging equipment. They want you to purchase it early on to show your commitment to the program. And then we would move into D, the design and build. We would have to return to council to grant an easement, much like Edison has easements throughout the city for their transportation distribution corridors. This would be no different, in which Edison would need access to the lot in order to maintain the underground infrastructure that they would be responsible for maintaining. So we would maintain the chargers themselves, but they would maintain everything that they put in for us. And then we move on to once the construction is complete, we move into the incentivization request. We file for our rebates, and then we continue to monitor the program and keep it in compliance over the 10 years.
So if we're committed to this, it's a 10-year.
It's a 10-year commitment. Yes.
And so the thought of tearing down the city hall and the fire station, relocating it because of the age of it, we can't even consider that right now.
Well, you can, and that's a really great point. I'm glad you brought it up because that's one of the sticking points that we need to discuss with council. We brought it up during our last, we brought this to council about a month or two ago as a discussion item to sort of gather feedback before we brought it back for a decision. If you don't, in theory, if you don't make the 10 years, Edison has what they call clawback costs, and they basically prorate what they spent on the project over that time. So let's say you make it to 8 years, and let's say the project costs between 500,000 and 800,000 for them. So in theory, let's say it costs 800,000. We think that's on the very high end, but let's say that you'd owe $200,000 back on the project. Probably much less than that, obviously, if it's only 500,000. So saying that it costs you, somewhere, around $120,000. The first, with a new building, which you would most likely electrify with electric vehicle chargers. It's not necessarily that you would have to, they would recoup all of that cost. There may be some sort of incentive program with Edison in the future to work with them in terms of electrifying that new building with some of the equipment that they've already, not necessarily put in place, but purchased and already planned for. The other part of that is that, it really comes down to the amortization of investment in the building over that time anyway. A good example of this is the HVAC unit that we just put in a couple of years ago on top of City Hall. So that project costs like, $500,000 or so, but wouldn't necessarily be something we would wait to do if we were possibly going to replace the building in 10 years. There's still investments to be made at City Hall. Now we would try to mitigate those. We're looking at some security enhancements at City Hall as well, and we will probably go ahead and implement those. And not necessarily something that we would wait to invest because of the investment. So that is a good argument, and there is some validity to that, but it also sort of goes to the point of what's the value that you get out of your investment over that time. So in other words, since we're seeing a net cost savings for the electrification over time, the question is answered by weighing what you were going to save in terms of energy over those, say, 8 years versus what your clawback costs, perhaps 120,000 would be at the end of that 8 years that you didn't recoup. So it's really a balancing point.
Okay, so let's talk about a couple of things. First of all, what you were talking about, the 10-year agreement. I think we had this discussion before, but an idea would be in the contract, should we demolish the building and start brand new, we would put a pause on the agreement and then let the agreement start again after construction's finished. I think that should be a consideration. I like the amortization because you got to see what that number is. We don't know what their cost is going to be, but the amortization makes complete sense. That's always done in lease agreements. But I think a consideration should also be done is we are going to electrify the next building. It's going to be very efficient. So why not have this service? We already have the infrastructure there. Everything's in there. We may have to redo some of the wiring once it gets to the building, wherever the underground parking lot is going to be, but it's there. We would just start it again. So in 5 years from now, the building gets demolished. We would have 5 years left that could be added on. Maybe it gets extended at that time. I have no idea, but that would be something I would recommend you look into to see if there's that option that you could put in that agreement. So it's not just the amortization. It would just be a pause on whatever the charges are, and then we start it up again once the construction is done.
It's a good thought. We hadn't considered that. I definitely think that's worth, exploring, and I guess it goes to the point that, the sooner that you implement the changes, the better, because you have a longer period before you have the demolition and you actually, knock out most of your contract before that time versus waiting a year or two. Maybe it's only 5 years before, or, 3 years or so before.
So I support this whole thing about electrifying the vehicles and having these stations. Can we go back to the map of the parking lot? So we discussed this before. We're going to have 34 level 2 EV charge points that are going to be at 60 amps, if I correct, each one.
So those would actually be, I think those are like 19 kilowatts. The amperage is in at 60, but it's at a point where I think you can deliver between like close to 20 kilowatts of power to a vehicle at any time.
And to charge a completely drained Tesla vehicle for the 34.2 EV would take approximately 8 to 12 hours.
It would probably be closer to 8 hours.
8 hours.
Yeah.
Okay. The level 3, which by the way, I love, would take only, I think, 30 minutes.
It depends. So yes, at the so there's the interesting thing about level 3s is that, level 1 is like you get, you plug in the wall, you get it. Level 2, you got about this much range of like good versus better. And then level 3 is you can buy an inexpensive one that you get like 60 kilowatts, and you can buy a supercharged that's 150. So like you get the higher end where you're talking about 120, 150 kilowatts, a supercharger, you're talking 30 minutes. If you're on the lower end, you're talking 60 minutes. So we have the one that we put in the fire lot, which we have a level 3 charger in there already, where that little box is. That was something we purchased a couple years ago through an air quality grant. That's on the lower end. That's a 60 kilowatt charger, but still charges the vehicle completely full in 60 minutes.
Okay.
Now, just to add one more thing to that, the operational plan for the police would be so much that they were never charging a fully empty vehicle. Like they would take advantage of when their vehicles are rotating through the lot about keeping it on chargers all the time. So they're never actually falling below, I think they said 60% or something like that,
Well,
50 or
And that
60%.
gets to another topic, because I did speak to some of the police officers, and they mentioned, they like the idea, but they said, has the city budgeted? Because I think they have 3 shifts or 4 shifts in a 24, is it 6-hour shifts when they're out on
I'm
patrol?
not sure. Is it, I think it's 12 hours?
It's 4 hours? So it's 4 hours. So the only thing is, we have to make sure when the battery drains, do we have enough? Because that means I'm not handing the keys to you and then she's taking, I don't know if there's enough power. We have to do that. If that study hasn't been done, I know it says 300 miles, but in 4 hours of them having the air conditioning going, don't forget, and I was going to get back to the other topic, the cost. Is this the cost to retrofit the vehicle for a police vehicle?
So I have to look at their costs again, but basically they've got the base Tesla cost and then they add 40,000 to the vehicle for upfitting.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, so that 109 is for the outfit. Okay,
Mhm.
perfect. So the question is that outfitting, is the duration of that vehicle, the 330 miles, has that taken into consideration? Because we're about to add 2,500 pounds to the vehicle.
I did ask that question. They've talked to other electric vehicle police departments, and they found that there isn't a substantial decrease in the range based on the upfitting. There is some impact, but it's not substantial. It's not like linear, and so like you add this much weight and then you drop this much. It's minimal, is what they found.
Got it. So I think you should just research that, because do we have enough vehicles? As long as we've got enough vehicles that there will be vehicles available for patrol, I think that's an important thing to look into. I don't think we can replace gas with the same amount of electric. I think we have to maybe add 1.5 more vehicles per gas for electric, just in the case a battery does get drained, we've got a vehicle available.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I keep thinking to myself that I don't know that they've got 40 vehicles. Well, we have X amount of cars now.
So they basically have, I think, 22 or 23, and they want to replace it with 20.
Okay.
So that's why I
Yeah,
think there might be
maybe a
need for more
shortage. Yeah.
vehicles. I
The-
personally, I wouldn't feel comfortable, but I love the lease idea. Go with the lease.
Yeah.
Don't go with the purchase.
Yeah.
Try to see in the lease if they take care of after they retrofit it. So find out when you lease the vehicle, okay, we're leasing it, but now we're retrofitting it. So who's doing the retrofit? Who's renovating it? And then when we hand back the car, it's, what's going to happen there?
Sure, they have that sorted out because they're working with
Okay.
the fleet management for the upfitting, because they've worked out options to either cycle out to a new car or actually purchase the car over some time, depending on the economics
Yeah.
of it.
Well, you just don't want to get stuck with a bill at the end of the 5-year term saying, well, in order to make this a passenger vehicle, it's going to cost us X amount. Now we're going to charge you. So
Mhm.
in the lease agreement, I think you should look into that and see what provisions to prevent, because as we all know, it's going to be a cage in the back seat, which is going to be heavily damaged by the individuals that are going to be there. So that just needs to be taken into consideration. Did you say the solar, we were planning on having solar that would, in the case of a power outage, that would be our replacement in case of electricity wasn't available to power the vehicle?
Sure. So as a separate item next week, we're bringing forward that solar project, which would be in the Mound parking lot. And we've worked with Edison to, you can't normally do this, but we've worked with Edison to secure a circumstance, a configuration where we can actually bring that power across the street and bring it to City Hall. Now, one of the caveats of the Charge Ready program, the area in red and orange there, is that you can't supply that with solar energy. You know, part of the reason that Edison's paying for all of this is so that they can charge us for the electricity on those vehicles. However, we can bring the power to the blue area because that's going to be our level 3 charger. It's a moot point because we don't necessarily need the solar power for the red area. City Hall, as it is on a given day, would use up all that solar power, no problem. And then even when we're not on operating day, we have plenty of use for that solar power to store it in batteries or use it for the level 3 charger eventually, or other purposes. But yes, we would be the Edison network, if it was an Edison outage, would be down, but we would have our own solar microgrid basically that would be up.
So I'm gonna, go ahead. So we only have the 2 level 3s. I really think we should have up to 8 level 3s, in my opinion. And I know that would cost more. I don't know if that money would then, and we would reduce the 34, but I'm just nervous that the batteries are going to keep on improving over a 5-year term. They're going to have a longer duration, probably go up to 500 miles
Sure.
eventually. They're going to become more efficient, but it's going to take longer time. And I do think we need a stronger power source to power these vehicles if we're going to be this efficient electrical, full vehicles being electric. I'm just thinking out loud, 2 level 3s isn't going to cut it. I know we can keep on changing them out and all that stuff, but
Well, let me elaborate on that a little bit. So with 2 level 3s, you would actually be able to charge 4 vehicles because they have the dual park configuration also.
oh, okay.
I should have clarified that. The limiting factor there's a couple limiting factors with level 3s, and then if your operational plan is never let your vehicles go below 50%, theoretically on one of these supercharger level 3s, you could charge your vehicle in 12 to 15 minutes. So you basically could swap out vehicles pretty quickly on those
Okay,
high
got it.
powered. But the limiting factor with level 3s is they're very expensive. So
Yeah.
the 60 kilowatt one we put in was $90,000 to put in. We are estimating if we're able to install like a high end 150 kilowatt charger, we're estimating it's going to probably cost about $150,000, if not more. We've budgeted for all this in the CIP, but it's expensive.
Sure.
The other thing is the power availability is limited. The city on average day, I think, I think the peak power usage for City Hall is probably on the order of 130 kilowatts for the entire building and everything connected, fire, police, and everything. So you're talking about that one charger actually exceeds the power that you use on a day, the peak power that the City Hall uses at any given instant over the course of the entire year at City Hall. So they extremely power intensive. Now we think that we have the capacity for this because there's a 1,000 amp panel at City Hall, but that's something that we still have to work out with the planning department in Edison as if it can be doable. It's doable in some way. It's just a matter of like, what's the cost and how much do you have to add to your current infrastructure?
Okay, so has it been debated then, since you clarified the level 3 where we can have 4 charging stations? I'm also looking in the police area parking lot. I think you're going to have how many more spots for the police department for their charge?
Well, you can't see them all, but so we've got, kind of 2 or 3 there, but there's more spots south of that blue area, I think.
I've seen the whole orange area.
Oh,
Those
how
are
many
all
spots?
gonna be
Oh,
charged?
gotcha. So there's 16, basically 16 ports in the police department out of the
Okay.
34.
So if we have these 2 level or 4.
You have
capabilities
2 over there and then 2 in the fire department. Because there's
Okay.
one charger and 2 ports already in the fire department right
Okay.
now. Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, do we need 16 level 2 charge ports for the police department, since we've got these super ones? You just got to move the cars around. It's like going to a gas station. I'm just thinking out loud, if that gets debated to reduce the overall cost, or is Southern California Edison saying, hey, we need to be at 34, we can't be any less, I don't know. Then-
That's,
That's
yeah,
the
that's the case.
Okay,
And
so
so actually,
yeah.
we did the evaluation you're talking about, because when we first talked about this a while back, one of the council members mentioned, well, 34 seems excessive. So we actually did a benchtop study to see, okay, how many police cars we have, how far do they drive a day, how much do they use, how many hours? We did this sort of evaluation and we figured out we can probably reduce the police lot to, well, I should back up and say the most expensive installation are the ones on the east and west sides. Because of the trenching from the center of the installation. So the police gets be the most expensive and the staff is a little bit expensive. So we figured if we can remove from the police side and the staff side, we can save some money. So we narrowed the police down to about 13 level 2s that we would probably need. But like I said, Edison says, no dice, 34 is the max. In fact,
they want, that's the minimum.
Yeah. that are the minimum. Yeah. In fact, it was 36. But because we have that level 2 charger at fire, there just wasn't room for 36. So it became 34. So that's the lowest number they'll go to fund the program.
So has it been debated then? Still don't give the police department that much since I don't think they need it. The level 3 is what they need. And I get the cost and all that stuff, but maybe move some of these over to the other side. Hear me out,
Sure.
because as we all understand and agree, there's going to be a ton of electric vehicles out on. And another idea is, have we reached out to ChargePoint, Tesla, or whomever, where we are going to charge the public, if the public, and we're going to have 14 spots for public use. Why not have 25 public spots or whatever that number is going to be, where we are charging, but then to offset this cost, we engage with Tesla or ChargePort or any of those people where, they're going to pay for it, and then we'll get the revenue sharing, but they'll install it for free. So I don't know if that's been discussed.
Sure. It's a good thought. So to address the number of chargers, they basically filled the lot. So there's no other spot to put additional chargers. Like every spot is accounted for. There was a thought about
Across the street.
there was a thought about going across the street, and we talked to Edison about that, to sort of move them across. With the way their program works, that would be a different account at the moment. Unless in the future we do the solar project, then we would have to combine the accounts for the 2 sides. So there is an opportunity to do some flexibility. It just was a premature conversation at this point because, their thoughts like, well, you guys haven't even signed the agreement. Now you're talking about like design configurations. And even this drawing itself was an expensive endeavor for Edison to do. They had to pay someone to draw it up. So for us to change sort of the configuration, I think they would be willing to do it, but it's one, I think they want us to commit to moving forward first before we start to sort of re-navigate the design. But it might be a possibility. We did look into it. It's just, we haven't gotten there far. As far as the payment gateway stuff goes, we also haven't established that yet, because that would take, some policy direction from council as to like, are we going to charge? How would the program work? That type of thing.
And in this Southern California Edison 10-year agreement, will there be a minimum electric bill charge to the city, even if you guys weren't using it? If for some reason you took a week of not charging, is there a minimum charge, or is it whatever we use, whatever we're charging, that's our charge?
It's whatever we use, that's our charge.
It's a pay to play.
Exactly. And in fact, they would put us on a special time of use like EV rate, so that we would actually have an advantageous rate that's designed for electric vehicles that would be most advantageous for overnight charging.
So that's why you're saying if we should move forward with the Southern California Edison deal, because whether we electrify the police station or not, or any of the vehicles, it's a pay to play. So if they're there, they're there.
And if we use them, we use them. And if we don't,
If for
Let
some
the
reason the
public
city
use it.
council doesn't pass it, we don't. Yeah.
Yeah, your costs are basically what I showed you as far as installation or purchase of the
90,
chargers, and then
yeah.
so that's your cost. So, and that's what we're saying is that whether we do this with Edison or we do it ourselves for any number of electric vehicles, there's costs involved. So let's say we want to put in a few level 2 chargers. That alone, the trenching, the electrical infrastructure, we would exceed our portion of the cost for Edison to do it. Because really, Edison has a grant. Edison has a grant from the California Public Utilities Commission. They're trying for people to use it, and that's what we're taking advantage of.
Yeah.
So I know that you talked about mound and being the solar panels over mound. Why is it, and maybe I missed it, why can't we do it over these parking?
Sure, we looked at it real closely, actually. And in fact, the original design was over City Hall. Well, City Hall itself, the building was not amenable because of all the different parapet walls and the angles, and the roof itself is very old. So you won't really get a solar developer who's willing to put something in on that where they'll have to take it back off to repair the roof. So then we looked at the lot here, and because the configuration, you have so many rows, it's an inefficient installation, because usually solar panel installations are like, you have like a pillar and then you have panels that go out. So you would actually have to put like 6 different rows of panels, and there's trees in there and uneven ground. So it actually didn't, we just thought mound was off limits because we couldn't bring the power across the street. There's a regulatory rule that prevents you from doing that. But once we were able to get around that, we got permission to do it because basically the city owns City Hall, the street, and the lot. That's when we moved it over to mound, where you have nice open areas. You can actually build like 3 structures. You don't have trees in the way. Your disruption is limited in terms of like the operations of the police and fire forces. So that's why it was a preferred spot. And actually, you actually got a better power generation because of the layout as well.
So again, I love everything that you're showing. I just think there should be some more debates and try to see with Edison, hey, can we move some of the spaces across the street? I really like, because I think there's going to be demand, and you're eventually going to have to do it anyway, somewhere. We're going to have to offer more public access charging stations because of just, it's inevitable. And if we've got this infrastructure going, might as well get Edison, and you got to figure out why that would be a separate account. That I'm not.
Well, it is right now. So we have a separate account for the lighting power over at Mound and Hope. And then we have a separate account for City Hall itself. So right now, the way the program's structured, you would apply for 2 different things, but eventually under the solar project, which is kind of separate because it's through the Clean Power Alliance, the accounts would be combined, and then we would be eligible to do that kind of thing. But at the moment, since you're dealing with, they're dealing with hundreds of applications from across their entire region, like in order to enter into the program, it would be 2 separate requests.
But you could do one account. You're just giving them an easement, and that easement would go to the other side, and then it would tap into that account.
Eventually, yes, but
Okay.
as the request goes now, because that whole situation doesn't exist at all at the moment, if we were to try to attempt it right now, it would be 2 separate installations.
Got it. Well, to me, I think we need more vehicles for the police department instead of 20. I think you got to take it up more because it looks very affordable. Only $383,000, and then we're only going to make $300,000 payments a year. To me, that's a no-brainer. You got to, but I think we need more. So I don't know if that's been debated. If it can be debated more, I would do it, because if we're going to get into this, we just got to make sure we're not running out of power or running out of, the vehicles.
Sure, I'm not sure how the police did their evaluation of their vehicle needs. They've somehow come to that number, but I'll definitely pass along, the concern that, having the vehicles readily available and sort of backups and that type of thing. I think that's
Yeah,
what
and I
they're
think you
kinda
got to
saying.
double check whoever did the checking into about, okay, with this extra weight, how long is it going to go with air conditioning going? If it's a 4-hour or if it's 6 hour, a 4-hour, how much is that going to take? I mean, I think it's going to, the power is going to get drained.
They have
really
talked about that. I know, especially for the K9 unit where they have to keep the dog cool. Or people, when they have people in their car, say they pick somebody up and they have to wait for processing and things like that. They have talked about that type of evaluation about just a constant use of power. So, and actually, when we talked about vehicle miles in terms of their usage every day, it's actually small city and they don't go very far. But in terms of vehicle miles, in terms like idling and usage, it's very, very high because the vehicles are basically on all day
on the
long.
entire time. And the air,
Yeah.
with all that equipment that the officers wear, they've got the air conditioner going.
It's a good point.
I would just, that's got to get evaluated, because once we start making this commitment, you don't want to say, oh, well, geez, I think we were off on our numbers on how many vehicles we should have, all that stuff. And again, I think now that you told me that the level 3, I still think we should have a couple more level 3s. I know that's a big
We'll certainly
ticket
do
item.
what we can afford and
Yeah.
what the capacity is. Our biggest concern is the electrical capacity.
Yeah.
You know,
I hear
the Glenarm supercharger station has, I think, 4 or 5 level 3s there, but it's next to their power plant. It's like right at Glenarm and Fair Oaks there. They have a whole array of level 2 chargers of Tesla chargers, and then they have a handful of level 3s, but they've got a massive amount of power coming into that facility. So it's really, that's the limiting factor, is the power.
I hear you. Well, great. Anything else from the commissioner? Or-
I had a couple of quick questions. This may be for somebody else to answer at another time. Has the the infrastructure costs very clearly presented tonight, and that was essentially what you were here to present to the commission. Has the Public Safety Commission or the Finance Commission looked at the actual cost of leasing and operating the vehicle?
The Public Safety Commission has, I don't know about the Finance Commission. As far as I know, the Public Safety Commission did make the recommendation that they should pursue the leasing contract. But so they did look at it. The Finance Commission, I'm not so sure.
Okay, and the reason I ask that is these leases can be structured in a number of ways. Ultimately, though, what happens is, there's a value established when the lease, when the vehicle is leased. And then depending on how long it's in use, there is a reduction in the residual value going into effect. And the customary practice on the companies that I've dealt with is that if, for instance, if the city wants to give a black and white back, it goes to auction, and whatever the auction, whatever proceeds comes from the auction is offset against the residual, and that could be either a few dollars or a significant amount depending on the condition of the vehicle.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's a question that should be asked, but probably not at this commission tonight.
I could certainly pass that along because that's an important thing to consider in terms of the structure of the lease.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that lease agreement is going to be very important. Well, but also not only the residual, but when you hand it back, will there be charges, right? Wear and tear. Yeah, great.
Who's responsible for the insurance, the automobile liability?
I think our risk management slash HR division is mostly responsible for that. Is that what you're asking about? Like who would make those types of decisions?
Yes,
Yeah, outside of our
purview.
yes, exactly. But I think it would be with our risk management.
Are we responsible for the cost of auto insurance?
I believe so.
And how much would that be?
I don't know. It's a really good question. I'm assuming your point is getting into like whether those costs shift with this type of scenario. It's a good question, and I also will make a note of that one for our staff also.
Are we thinking that electric vehicles are more insurance wise than
Yes.
gasoline?
No gas, electric vehicle.
Electric vehicles cost
The
more
fleet
insurance.
that retrofitted the complete package per
Okay.
vehicle, it's gonna be expensive.
The repair cost for electric vehicles is significant. Excuse me, significantly higher also.
Oh, is that? Oh,
Yeah.
Right.
But there would be a warranty on the 5-year problem.
Yeah, likely most of those things are under warranty. I think what Commissioner Catania is probably referring to is if you have a long-term owner of a vehicle and you kind of beat it into the ground, the battery replacement cost could be very significant. So that's a good point in terms of like what they're looking for in terms of the life of that vehicle, given their heavy usage.
Yeah, but I think it's a good idea to get an estimate on the insurance.
I'm
Yeah.
curious about the battery, what kind of batteries they are, and what's the shelf life, and where do they go when they
Yeah.
die?
that's, That's one of the big issues and has been apparently with electric vehicles is battery. And what do we do
Sure.
with them? How do we dispose of them? And what's the life expectancy of them? And a replacement cost, and whether it's a 5-year, 10-year, whatever it is.
Yeah, and then where do they go?
Yeah, and
So it's a good question. So,
The-
I'm not an expert in this, but Tesla in particular, has significant sustainability goals in terms of their battery usage. And so it's a lithium ion battery and has quite a life on it. I think that might be, I don't have those exact specifics, but I do know that the batteries get like down cycled basically. So a lot of some of the electric gas blower batteries are like repurposed
yeah, I think
Tesla
they-
batteries.
I think they can actually tear them apart, peel them out and dispose of them to where there's.
Or use them
very
in,
little
in
loss.
higher, in lighter duty types of devices.
But if everybody is doing the electrification,
Yeah.
there's a finite source of lithium. So where do we go from there if the lithium source is exhausted?
It's an interesting question,
That is like, I think, way up.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a fundamental question about, sustainability in terms of like
Right.
moving from one limited resource to another. So it's a good point. It's not
I
something we're
think that-
tackling.
But I think, and again, I don't have the data in front of me. Whatever waste
Yeah.
electric car
That's-
would have with the lithium, or where is it gonna go and all that, I do think it gets recycled. I don't know the details, but whatever recycling or waste generated from an electric vehicle, if it got repurposed and it got put into, the ground versus the emissions coming from a gasoline vehicle. When
Outweigh
you
each
look at
other.
that, you're gonna see the emissions and the pollution caused by vehicles versus the electric. I think there's a dramatic difference.
There's also particle pollutants caused by the tires, the running and the braking of. So we have to have like an air quality monitors, especially where the police station is or anywhere where there's lots of traffic.
But wouldn't that be a wash?
I don't think so.
Braking for a gas car versus an electric car?
Well,
Wouldn't that be the same?
it is the same, but the electric cars run faster, I think.
We mean by run faster.
Well, look at the
You mean run faster speed wise?
speed wise, yes.
Yes.
So that would generate a lot of
No, I
pollutants
think
in
that
there.
the speed will be determined by the officer. The officer can only go a certain speed. It's the torque that to get to a certain speed, an officer might be able to get to that speed, but in the city, gas or electric, they're gonna have limitations because they're weaving in and out of cars. So I don't know if that would play a factor. Again, I'm not a prof- but that's just my thoughts on a logical standpoint.
But we really haven't studied about the air quality or any monitors, especially on the health impact of the residents.
Yeah, we don't have data on those types of elements of that. And so, those are good questions I can bring forth back to our police department with regard to considering the vehicles themselves.
I don't know.
Maybe we should have Elon Musk here. And
That's
ask.
not a bad idea.
I
He'll
think
just
o-
say he'll build a rocket ship and just send it out into space.
We'll borrow his engineers.
yeah.
It doesn't have to be here.
I would think a study would, in my personal opinion, would be unnecessary. I think that's just my thoughts on that type of topic. I think it's a wash. The question just comes down to is, will we have the infrastructure to be able to support the police department? And will the need, be beneficial to the police, and will it be efficient accordingly? I think that's the big topic, or what needs to be, like what he was saying, the lease agreement is very key. It's
Right.
got to be spelled out really well.
Yeah, and so, the police would be the experts on that evaluation. They brought that forward. In terms of us, trying to support them, we are really just trying to find the best solution to
Yeah.
the electrification needs.
I have a question on the space occupied by the solar panels up in Mound. That particular lot is designated for senior affordable housing. It's counted in our housing element. Would that affect the construction then of the affordable housing?
I haven't reviewed the most recent version. I think I know what you're talking about. It's some sites being designated, even I think this city hall site was designated at some point. I don't know that it is anymore, but it's a good question. If it was, that might be a conflict, but my understanding was it wasn't designated any further, but it's a good thing for us to look into.
Is it at the solar panels, the Mound project right here where the parking lot is?
Yes.
It is. Okay. Because I think the one that I thought you were talking about was the one behind Bank of America, behind the workshop theater, that area.
I thought that was the one.
Oh, I'm sorry. So there's some confusion. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're talking about the one here, that's right across from the fire station. But you're probably right that I think that the other one is included in the housing element, but this one is where the solar panels will be located is
Across the fire
across from the
station.
fire
Oh,
station. Yeah,
okay.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. that
North
Mound.
of that alley. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for clearing that up.
So are we all good on City Hall electrification project?
Well, I guess the formal action would be if you'd like to make a motion to recommend that, given the outcome of the city council's decision on the fleet electrification, that there's a recommendation to move forward with the recommendation to city council to move forward with the charge ready program participation.
Great, let's go for it.
I will recommend.
Do we
that
need to make a motion or?
be passed. I'll make that motion.
Okay, there we go.
You need a roll call?
Yes, I do. Okay, so for the motion for it to be recommended to go to city council was made by Commissioner Hernandez, seconded by Vice Chair Catania. I'm gonna do the roll call just so Commissioner Sam Hernandez, Vice Chair Frank Catania, and Chair Malley.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes 3-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ted.
Thank you.
Great. Well, let's go over to action items. Rania, I think we have the adoption. Do we need to do a motion on that?
Yes, the minutes for July meeting.
Great.
So if anybody'd like to make a motion to
I will
approve,
Make a motion to approve it.
perfect.
I'll go ahead and second it with just a question
Yes.
on page 2,
Uh-oh.
upper right-hand corner. Should that not read September 14th rather than July?
Minutes.
Page 2 of our agenda.
Oh, page 2 of the agenda.
Yes.
Oh, yes, you're right. That didn't get changed.
Okay. I was just curious about that.
Oh, is this there?
Other than that, I have no other corrections to be made.
Okay, I'll make sure to revise it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for pointing out, Commissioner Hernandez. Okay, so I have a motion to approve the minutes by Chair Malling. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank
Thank you.
you. And with roll call, Commissioner Hernandez,
Yes.
Commissioner Catania, and Chair Malling.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 3-0. Thank you.
Great. We're on to communications. City Council liaison. I will hand it off to you.
Okay, today I attended a conference hosted by AQMD, and they talked about mainly AB 617. It is about air quality, and the title of our conference, it's the 8th annual conference. It's called Environmental Justice Conference, Our Environment, Our Lives, Collaborating for Clean Air. And California Attorney General, Department of Justice, Rob Bonta was the opening speaker, and he spoke about environmental and social justice. And also he talked about a grant of $10 million to reduce vehicle emission. And I would like to know if our public works have applied for grants on this reduction of vehicle emission. I just wanted to make sure that we get something from the state or the federal. But he's very Mr. Bonta is very for Clean Air Act, and he focuses his interest on communities that are poor and not South Pasadena. I was told today that we are not called a disadvantaged community because we are a wealthy community. I said that's not true, but we don't qualify for any of the grant under
Yeah.
AB 617, but we can certainly apply, like whatever they do, which I had a opportunity to tell them that we are a city of trees, and to reduce the gas emissions, we have pocket parks, community gardens, and to absorb all those toxic emissions. And we do have parks, which are some of the cities, they don't have any, but we do in our little city, we do have open space. And I was asking how they could help the city council to engage the community to do projects to encourage the preservation of a clean air that we breathe. And yeah, and they also emphasize the involvement of youth and especially high school kids. So that I learned a lot, quite a bit.
Right. That's great. Well, wonderful. Commissioners, communication, anything from you or Sam?
Well, I think I probably should mention it, that we had a city council meeting Wednesday of last week, and a presentation was made on behalf of the South Pasadena Tournament of Roses, that we were asking for a title report, a survey of the War Memorial Building, and the blessings from our council members, with the lead being Evelyn Zeimer, which was absolutely wonderful that she spoke up on our behalf, that we are going to at least now get a title report and a survey. Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Antenna. They're picking up the cost on it to see if in fact we can actually build our barn, and I hate to call it a barn, but it's the house that we've been wanting to for the last 12 years, between Ted Shaw and Isabel Green and a few others. I think that Evelyn was up there along with Michael Cacciati, went up and visited with back a few years ago. Wonderful design of the building, and we're hoping that it'll all go through, and we'll be able to go forward, because the Tournament of Roses, as you know, has been around for over 120 years that we've been building our own float and don't have a building and have it outdoors. And we have a wonderful time in 6 inches of rain in cold weather where glue doesn't stick to the flowers and the flowers don't stick to the float. So we're looking forward to continuing this wonderful tradition for so many years that I want to make sure that I publicly let everyone know how wonderful it was for our councilwoman Zeimer to step forward with all of that too. So thank you. And I don't have anything else. Thank you.
Well, great. Upcoming events. I don't think we have anything to discuss, or do we, Ted?
Just one quick one. We have a citywide open house that we'll be hosting on October 2nd, Sunday. So we'll actually be closing the street between Mission Street between Fremont and Fair Oaks, doing sort of like a mini little open street. We bring all the departments. We'll have some public works vehicles there, some public safety vehicles there. There'll be various vendors there, and you can take a tour inside the first floor of City Hall as well. So that's October 2nd, starting at 10 a.m. on Sunday.
Great. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And with that said, I don't think we have anything else, Raina. I think we can adjourn, right?
Yes. Meeting adjourned. It is 7:56. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.